please read the district mission statement?
Sorry. Thank you. Ipswich Public Schools aspires to empower all students to be global citizens who are effective communicators, analytical problem solvers, and savvy consumers of information. We propose to do this through an emphasis on communication, critical thinking, creativity, self-management, perseverance, and collaboration. Students will be active partners in authentic learning, offering voice and choice in demonstrating competency.
Thank you. All right, announcements and special acknowledgements. The next school committee meeting will be held on Thursday, January 16th at 7 in the Middle High School Ensemble Room. We are in the talks of holding a tri-board meeting on Tuesday, January 14th, but this has not yet been officially scheduled. The school committee will be meeting, the school committee will not be meeting on December 19th or January 2nd. The budget and policy subcommittees will be meeting on December 17th at 4 and 5:30. Schools will be closed Monday, December 23rd through Wednesday, January 1st for winter break, and school will resume on Thursday, January 2nd. Special acknowledgements or other announcements?
Yep, just a few special acknowledgements. Shout out to the middle school students and staff for their production of Elf Junior last weekend. I understand that it was another outstanding show. And this fall, we're doing things a little bit differently. We did not have all of the student athletes come out because some of them are involved in other sports already and band and whatnot. So I'm going to read into the record and acknowledge all of our fall sports awards notable accomplishments. Starting out with our Cape Ann League Baker Division champions in volleyball. Cape Ann League Baker Division Sportsmanship Award goes to the girls cross country and football teams. The MIAA D4 Final Four champs were in volleyball, and then the state champs also in volleyball was our girls volleyball team. Cal League Baker Division Player of the Year went to Abby Allen for field hockey and Addison Pillis in volleyball. Cal Baker Division Coach of the Year, Nikki Pignon, our field hockey coach. MIAA MAVCA Division 4 Volleyball Tournament MVP was Alex Marino. And MIAA MAVCA D4 Tournament All-Tournament Team, Franny Hertz and Avery Brown. Individual sports, girls cross country, first team All-Star, Lucy Winthrop. In field hockey, first team All-Star, Abby Allen. Second team All-Star, Bella Bruno, Maddie Hansen, and Jane Kraus. In football, first team All-Star, Massimo Pinsky, and second team All-Star, Will Gromko and Luke Weil. In golf, first team All-Star, Connor Wright, second team All-Star, Samir Harb. Boys soccer, first team All-Star, Ned Belezza and Spencer McDavitt. Second team All-Star, Zane Norton and Darwin Ramirez. In girls soccer, second team All-Star, Lily Harper and Asuka Keo. In volleyball, first team All-Star, Claire Belezza and Addison Pillis. Second team All-Star, Emily Hannibal and Alex Marino. So congratulations to all of our fall sports.
I have to the middle school chorus concert that was Monday. Great music, festive, clearly lots of talent and dedication went into that. It was a fun event. Second, the green team for hosting the toy and clothing swap. It was green team. It was great. Personally found a treasure, as you know. A game from my childhood. It was amazing. So anyway, thank you for doing that, green team. And I'm looking forward to next year's. I have lots of stuff to give away already. Thank you.
So I was just wanted to make an announcement that the Ipswich Interact Club has their annual Jingle Bell Walk this Saturday, December 14th. greet Santa at Town Wharf at 11 a.m. and then participate in the Jingle Bell Walk that goes from the wharf up to Town Hall. And there will be food, crafts, games, and raffle items, and all are welcome, and entrance is free.
Exciting.
Fun.
Anything else? All right. I'll just add kind of what you were saying, Jenny, about the music programs. Like the higher levels tend to draw really big crowds, and they're wonderful. I got the opportunity to see a selection of the chamber orchestra last evening, and it was just amazing. But I saw the fifth graders at Winthrop last week, and it's really neat to kind of see where they start, where they end up, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a great season. All right, thank you all. We'll move on to public comment. I'll read our statement. Public comment is on discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It's an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. While the committee and/or administrators will not typically respond during public comment, the chair, as presiding officer of the meeting, may choose to see if she deems it expeditious. Further, should the chair believe that an issue falls outside the purview of the school committee, she may request that citizens direct it to the appropriate person or body so that the matter is given proper consideration. Are there any public comments? Okay. Move on to community presentations, starting with the middle school handbook update, and we welcome Principal Peter Ginolfi.
Good evening. Thanks for getting me on the agenda tonight. We just had one small item. As you may know, last year we redid our handbook, and we had a progressive discipline policy put together, and we had a committee that studied these from many schools, and there's one area that we're a little bit lacking in. We had, in our handbook, in the section around safety, we have a portion about horseplay, where kids are just too rambunctious and hands on each other, and happens a lot in middle school. And then the next section is fighting, and there's nothing in between. We have very few fights, but we wanted to add this one piece called inappropriate physical contact, where sometimes a situation occurs where a student pushes somebody or does something physical that's not a fight, and we just had a hole in our discipline code, so we wanted to fill that. So we have inappropriate physical contact. Our school council approved that at our November meeting. And I know you had advanced copy, and we'd just like to add this to our handbook. If anybody has any questions.
So left to right, it's first offense, second offense, third offense?
First, second, third.
And what's ISS?
ISS is in-school suspension, which we use pretty sparingly.
Okay, yeah, I just didn't know what it stood for. Okay.
That would be multiple offenses of that.
What's that, restorative justice intervention?
Restorative justice is really a conversation with the students. If it's a broader problem, we have our restorative justice circles that we have, but this would be more of a restorative conversation among students and staff. We've used it a few times for disciplinary things, usually when students are, we've used it so far where maybe someone made a discriminatory remark or something like that, or just a mean comment, and bring them together and talk. We use our protocol that we use for our circles all the time, from the Circle Forward book that we have a lot of training on.
You done? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm just joking.
So in restorative justice intervention, is this person singled out or is that what occurs? Like, is a person singled out?
Well,
that did
there would
or-
also be the consequence that you see there, like a possible detention, depending on what it was, but.
Right, but in restorative justice, I think it's
Usually
great.
we would have,
Are they singled out? That would be,
we would have a victim, the aggressor, usually a guidance counselor, a school administrator. Sometimes we bring other students in that were, depending on what the offense was, maybe someone just supportive person there, a good friend of the victim. And just,
But it wouldn't be
So it's
in a
not a
group
group?
of
Oh, okay.
wider students.
no, it's really
Oh,
just
thank you.
It's like
Just like
specific
a
finite
student,
group,
okay.
a targeted
Okay.
group of people that were invited there.
Okay,
Yeah.
for some reason I thought it
Yeah,
was like
it's
always a group
conflict
of
mediation.
kids that were always together. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And for the inappropriate physical contact, do you have a measure of like what defines horseplay, inappropriate contact?
Yeah,
fighting?
horseplay is really just kids that are equally engaging, just having fun, and them being very young and still energetic. Just the play gets just too rough, and we don't want to have hands on each other even when they're playing, so that's really just a playful that got out of control.
And then how is the inappropriate physical contact defined?
Someone might be upset with somebody else, but it's not a full-blown fight. That's the next step that we have in our handbook now, and we needed this interim measure because we don't really see many fights, luckily, but sometimes kids get angry at each other and they'll push somebody or something like that. And it was just a hole in our handbook that we needed to fill it.
I think that was my question, because what we have here is just this one row, and so in the handbook, it'll be
Yeah, that
stepwise,
would
and it'll
fit
make
in
sense.
right
Okay.
between horseplay and the other.
Okay,
And I know the word inappropriate, sometimes people think there's a sexual thing to that. It's nothing to do with that. It just means they shouldn't be doing that. Having contact which they shouldn't be at that time and place.
so, other questions?
Actually, I was going to ask that. So like, or I was wondering it anyway. It's like, I guess the distinction in terms of inappropriate is there's something aggressive in the nature is what.
Yeah, it's somebody that's
Is that,
probably upset with someone else and,
does
they're
it fall
still.
under a header that indicates that? So like
Yes,
those
it's
three
under our actually, it's under gracious, our G. We switched we had genial, we had that as our topic, and everybody wants to switch it back to gracious, which really covers the same things, but it's in that same heading of similar types of incidences.
We need to vote to approve the change.
I think so.
Move to support the change in the middle school student handbook as presented.
Second.
Right, moved by Kate, second by Jen. Further discussion? All those in favor? Right, 7-0.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
You too. All right, we are.
Just saw the bicycle people come in. Are they expecting others, or?
Oh, do you want me to go?
Yeah, yeah.
So ahead of schedule.
I don't know if they're expecting other folks with them or not.
We could do other things if we needed to.
Right there. Here we go. Yeah. Oh, okay. Then, we will jump ahead one.
So we'll jump ahead.
We can jump
And
in.
then-
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll jump ahead to the superintendent's administrative report.
Okay. I think, for the record, this is probably the earliest I've ever delivered this report in
all
the course
awake.
of the meeting.
Design.
It's been a few weeks since our last meeting. There's a few things that I want to highlight in my report this evening. Over the past few weeks, I've spent time working with the contractors who are going to be doing all of the work over the Christmas break, holiday break. First project is the flooring project out here in the PAC lobby. They'll be ripping up all of the tile, taking care of the concrete underneath, and then putting the same flooring down that's in the breezeway and Main Street. So that'll be the next phase of the project, and then we'll finish that off with the rotunda and the two entryways to the middle school and high school over the summer. It's too big a project to try to get done in a short amount of time. So that phase will be done during Christmas break. The contractors will be on site every day during the break except for the holidays in order to get it done before we come back. The second project is the rekeying of the elementary schools. All the locks and keys are in. They're currently being put together and aligned according to our specifications, and they'll be on site also during the break to make all the lock changes. And then the third project will be the installation of the safety film on select doors and windows throughout the district. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with the contractor to review the scope again. All the materials are on hand and ready to go. As you know, one of my goals this year was to see all of these projects through to completion. I had my monthly meeting with Tom Gallagher. We reviewed the fall sports season and sort of a preview of the winter season. I also participated in two READY sessions, the Race Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion workshops, focusing on difficult conversations. One session was held in Marlborough, the other one was virtually. Our admin team meeting focused on budget planning, the capital plan that I submitted to the town, and a review of the new contract provisions that are now in place in each of the bargaining unit contracts. Also discussed some concerns about heating at the middle high school. We've had several rooms where the motors went on the Univent systems, so we've got, I think, all of them repaired now. Tracy also reviewed some of the upcoming professional development opportunities, our learning cycles coming up in January, and reminders about MCAS testing dates. The other update that I wanted to provide the school committee was that the work at the Winthrop classroom has been completed, and we've moved the students back in. So I think that situation is resolved, and we're done with it now. We're keeping an eye on the other classrooms, and we'll be planning to potentially take out the tiles and take out the carpeting and everything in the other adjacent rooms as well going forward. But it's not an emergency because there's no odor or anything like that, any issues or immediate concern. The DEI team met last week and reviewed our ongoing work in each of the schools. We had the admin team and central office staff got together last week and this week, two separate occasions to share a meal and some holiday spirit, which was enjoyable. Yesterday, the communications subcommittee met, as well as we're calling it the STAC P2 group. It's the stadium, the track out here. We're looking to build a field house. They've got maybe half to three-quarters of the money raised already through paying grants and other money that they had left over from the original project. So they're going to be, they came forward to us, school committee, and asked for an extension on one of the paying grants that they had. We talked about the installation of the sewer line that they're going to be putting in next summer. So that was a big piece of it. And then they talked about trying to get together the specifications of the building itself so that we can start putting some hard numbers together about what they still need to fundraise, so then they can go out and do some of those fundraising efforts once they have some hard numbers. So that project is moving along. I also had a meeting with Ipswich Aware to discuss programming for next year and how they can help the schools. And my final piece, since the agenda is posted publicly now on the MSBA website, we've been invited to participate in the board meeting for MSBA tomorrow, which is a very hopeful sign that we'll be invited back into the program. Myself, Diana, Jen Donahue, Tom Markham, Steve Crane, and Linda Alexson have been invited to attend the virtual meeting. Now, I know that there's been a number of letters to the editor over the last few weeks about a school building project, and the first thing that we have to do is be invited into the process. And I want to stress that. It's a process. It's a long process that's very well organized by MSBA. There's a long road ahead of us if we get invited in tomorrow. It's a very good sign, a very strong sign that we're on the agenda. But the votes haven't been counted yet, and so I just want folks to be aware of that, but we will be on the call. Once we're invited in, they'll begin what they call an eligibility period, and they've given me some indication that if invited in, ours would start somewhere around July, because they stagger the starts of the districts that are getting invited in. During that time, they'll be doing we'll have to do a feasibility study. And during that feasibility study, that's when MSBA will be working with us to look at all of the work that we've done in town, all of the different considerations that we've made, looking at our options, and including looking at the model school program that seems to be, percolating out there. We have to look at all those things as part of the feasibility. I know that there's been some back and forth about that. There's several phases that we'll be working through if invited in over the next couple of years. It's not like we're going to get invited in tomorrow and start building a building in a week. It's a very long process that we're going to be entering into. So I just want folks to be aware of that and understand that. So looking forward to the call tomorrow afternoon. It's a virtual meeting. The meeting starts at 1. It's slated from 1 to 3. And we'll go from there.
Exciting stuff.
Oh, go ahead, Haley.
No, I was just going to clarify that at that meeting, that's when the board will vote to
Yes.
determine whether or not they will invite us
Yep.
in. So we'll know
So
definitively tomorrow.
my understanding is there's an internal committee that's reviewed all of the applications, and they're making final determinations that the board will then vote on. So much like anything that comes before our board, it's been vetted and comes to us. They may have questions, their board members may have questions, and they'll take a final vote.
How did we know how they determined who to invite as representatives from?
So they asked, they said town officials, town and school officials, so it's not a huge crowd, so it's the town administrator, chair of the select board, chair and vice chair of our school committee, myself and Tom.
So when they said the eligibility period might not start till July, does that mean, so I think the eligibility period is 270 days, if I'm correct. So that 270-day clock might not
That's my understanding.
start. So we might not need to, for example, form a school building committee until next fall or something.
We'll find, there's another meeting that, if invited in, that they've got scheduled for next week, that
We'll
we'll
give them
have
one of
folks
those.
sit in on, just to hear what that looks like, what the next steps are.
I have a few other questions. So you mentioned a capital plan. I know you were working to revamp our capital plan. So that's been submitted to the town?
It's been submitted to the town. I'm meeting with Stephen Crane on Monday or Tuesday. The capital plan requests far outweigh by millions of dollars what's available. So
I heard about some of it at strategic planning. That's why I'm asking.
in the things that you feel that you need and want in the plan, and we'll see next week how it all shakes out. But there's certainly going to be some tough decisions to make.
Well,
The changes, if I can just clarify, so the changes, what I did was, because we've had such turnover in some of our personnel between Chris Race leaving, and changes on the town side as well, a lot of the things that were put in the plan were just from that school dude report back in
5 years ago.
5 years ago. And so there were things that I said, I looked at and I said, they don't need to be in there, because we've looked at, Brad and I looked at different things. For example, one of the things that was in the plan was to repave the parking lot at the Paul F. Doyle Memorial School. We don't need to spend $160,000 on repaving a parking lot. We can put, restripe the lines and be done. Right? So some of those things are how I walk through it. There were also a lot of things that were not in the plan ever that I needed to make sure we got in the plan, like the carpet for the turf field. We needed to add that. We needed to add the refinishing of the Roundy Gym floor.
Okay.
And the bleachers in the Roundy Gym. And then in out years, we need to redo the floor in the lower gym and cafeteria, because that's nearing end of life at this point with the age of the building.
Could either the full school committee or maybe the budget subcommittee have a chance to look at that and ask questions? Because I know as budget season progresses, we're sort of asked to understand that and defend it. And so I just want to make sure so I don't know if it's more appropriate for the full committee or start with the budget subcommittee. Maybe we can review it at one of those meetings.
However, we want to take
Because
a
it's
look
come
at
up at strategic planning and I didn't have any answers because we hadn't seen it yet, so.
Carl Nyland had reached out to me about the boilers at
Yeah.
at
The school, yeah.
looking at electrification, and I got back to Carl this morning. I said, we put them in one each year, not knowing. I mean, the problem is with those types of items, you replace them while they're still functioning, or do you
Wait, yeah.
replace them when they break, right? So we know that we've had issues with both of the boilers here already, and so instead of, it was originally one big ask to replace both boilers, and I split it out into the next 2 fiscal years. But again, there's 6 million, I'm making this number up. There's 6 million in asks, and we've got 2 million to spend, so there's gonna be
Between
a
the school and the
lot.
town.
What's that?
And the town's got stuff too.
Well, that's what I mean. Overall, the ask was, between the town and school, was like $5 or $6 million, and there's 2 and change to spend. So there's going to be a lot of projects that don't get funded.
And then just the Winthrop classroom, how many weeks were they out of their classroom? Like, many? Just to,
September.
It was in September. October?
at least a month.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't recall if it's, pull them out. 7 or 8. Certainly 7, yeah.
Okay.
So October-ish? Yeah.
I just think that's worth
Yep.
acknowledging that was,
Well, it took us a
Building
while
is
to
in rough
figure
shape.
out what the issue was.
yeah. No, I'm
Yeah,
I'm just saying the public should know, like,
Yeah.
that was a really disruptive, long, because of the
Lost
condition of the building.
Essentially lost the use of the art room for that time period.
Yeah, it's an important point. It would be disruptive for any of us. Think about the age of the people that are in that room too, how
Yeah.
significant that long period of time is. And I think it's unfortunate we're having conversations like that. Those kind of things are happening on a more and more regular basis for our elementary students.
I just out of curiosity, I'd love to see the capital plan
Sure.
as well, whenever that's ready to be.
I mean, I can send you a draft, but I can guarantee that the draft isn't going to look anything like the final version. I can
Yeah.
share out what I submitted.
Maybe also
I actually
just,
submitted it in pieces to the town because
Yeah.
Catherine puts it all together.
But I guess another reason I want to see it is because I know it's going to come up in climate resiliency. Are we asking for gas boilers? Are we looking to electrify? And it's come up as part of the strategic plan too. So I just, on those, as liaisons to both of those, it'd be good for me to have a sense of at least what we've asked for.
I suggest share a draft when you've got a high confidence version of it.
Yep.
Right? If it's Now it's just the full list. We know it's not going anywhere. It's probably
Right,
not.
well, and right
circulating.
now, I only have the school side, I don't have anything from the town side, nothing's put together yet.
Sure. And then when we feel like it's ready, we can add it to budget subcommittee and then as appropriate full.
Yeah, I should have
Certainly needs
something
to come
next
to this
week
full
when I
group,
meet
but
with Stephen.
we can sort out timing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your flexibility with timing. We're going to bounce back to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Group presentation. Yeah. Great. 5 minutes.
Hopeful news about the MSBA agenda tomorrow. My
Yes,
Fingers and
thank you.
toes crossed, waiting for positive news. So thank you, everyone, for having us here tonight. Chris Chapman, 1 Mascot Road, here to speak on behalf of the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Board. We really had kind of 3 main topics to talk through. It's been about 6 months since we've last been in front of the school committee. In that time frame, there was a grant window opportunity run by the MassDOT Safe Routes to School program. Unfortunately, we didn't apply for any projects within that grant window. But I think that process was kind of instructive for us to understand that within the 30-day grant window period, that is not enough time for us to identify an issue, circulate it within the town to get priorities, get it quoted, and then write the grant application and get it reviewed and submitted, right? So even though we missed the last grant writing opportunity, I think that was really a lesson for us that in order to prepare for the next grant cycle, we need to have a list of priorities that's communicated and agreed to between the select board, the school committee, planning, DPW. Those are quoted, so they're pre-ranked, they're pre-quoted, and they're kind of ready to go. So then the next time the grant window opens up, we already have the force-ranked set of projects that the town already agrees to, and we can just go chase them. And we've been working pretty proactively with Alan, the new planning director, and he said very proactively one of his strengths that he plans to bring into the town is chasing grant opportunities. And he's had a pretty successful win rate in his previous job. So we're hoping as long as we kind of identify what the opportunities are, we circulate them and get kind of agreement, concurrence with the schools, with planning, DPW, and the select board, that we'll have a better opportunity the next time the grant writing window opens up again. To that end, we've been trying to work with the schools, with Dr. Blake, and also with planning to kind of get feedback of the town of, from not just from our perspective, but from the town's perspective, what are some priority areas? Where would people like to walk or bike or scoot? Where are people trying to cross the road and cars are traveling too quickly, or no one can see them on the sidewalk, or no one waits for them to pass? Or are there areas where there's a sidewalk that's fallen into disrepair, and so people use it as a parking area instead of as a sidewalk? We have kind of a preliminary list that we've developed. We've worked with Dr. Blake, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, to review that kind of preliminary list. We've shared that with Alan and Jared from the planning department. But really the ultimate goal is by the springtime, we'll have a list that is at least been preliminarily reviewed within the town, and it's meant to be a living document, right? No street is ever going to be paved and it's perfect, it never needs to be touched again, but at least if we know what areas, whether it's streets or striping or sidewalks or crosswalks, what areas, are really concerns for us, we'll have the list that's already generated. It'll be coordinated with, planning, DPW, so then when grant opportunities open up, we can go chase them. So that's, hopefully if we come back in 6 months from now, we'll have the list together that's been reviewed, will be in front of planning and DPW and the select board, and that'll all be kind of in place and agreed to. So we'll be in a better position the next time around. The second thing to bring up is, the nice thing for us, bicycling wise, is oftentimes we're kind of slower in the wintertime. We're preparing for the spring and the next year. We've heard that there is a walkability audit that the state's trying to coordinate in Beverly, and they're pulling in some kind of nearby town resources from other nearby towns to use it as a training session so that we kind of understand the process of performing that walkability audit. That's also one of the criteria where if we go to apply for grant funds or add content to a MassDOT tip project, having the results from that walkability audit helps influence how the state responds to our proposals and helps really tell them which upcoming TIP projects need bike lanes or need sidewalks or need crosswalks. So I think that's coming up in January. Yeah, late January. And then we can report out after that. I mean, certainly that audit is in Beverly. So I think it's the area around Beverly Depot and Rantoul Street. But the purpose of that is to kind of train people as to how to perform the audit. So we can coordinate with Alan and Jared in the planning department, bring that knowledge back to Ipswich and perform those same walkability audits here to see are there areas that people otherwise would walk, but they just don't have the resources or the infrastructure to support them in doing that. And then the third point that I just want to touch on was we've heard from the Winthrop School Council that they're preparing for a bike rodeo in the springtime, which is great. We love to see those things. It's being run by the Winthrop School Council, so we're in a support role. We're not in a leading role. But there are state resources, whether it's Safe Routes to School, there's Bike Safe, there's a number of resources that we can kind of help bring in, whether it's outside instructors to help kind of conduct the bike rodeo, or resources if we need cones or stickers or bike lights or helmets or that kind of thing. I just wanted to bring that up here, both for awareness for the Winthrop community and also for the Doyon community and the middle school and high school, where if we wanted to conduct kind of similar, age-appropriate, kind of safety-minded events, we're certainly here to help facilitate those, right? If we're not just trying to focus on Winthrop because they're taking the lead with their own bike rodeo, if the other schools want to perform kind of similar types of events where, the middle school, high school campus, given where it is, if people are trying to, cross the road to get to Little Wolf or cross over to take a right and walk up through High Street to get back to their home, there may be, resources or, events we can help facilitate to make sure that they're being, safe navigating the town that they live in. And that's really it. That's just a quick update that we had, and maybe we'll be back 6 months from now to give a further update.
If I could, hi Chris. Just in case people don't know, I'm also on the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Board, and it's been great to be involved in that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. It's important for the grant process to have a better chance of being selected for a grant if the boards approve the areas that are being submitted for, just so they can see that the school committee, the select board, the town manager has said, yes, all in agreement that these are the issues that would benefit from that grant.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, very much so. And I guess just to clarify, so we're volunteers. We don't work for the town directly, so we can't write the grant. We can't go off and chase resources or commit town funds or make any of those decisions. We can help facilitate all of that, but we are not the grant writers or people who are submitting the grants. But absolutely, when in the Safe Routes to School grant writing process, if we were to go chase a grant in the future, part of the selection criteria is who supports it within the town. Is it just coming from one resource at one school, or is there kind of broad community support between the schools and planning and the select board to go off? And it could be a variety of projects. I mean, it could be something as simple as there's a crosswalk, but it hasn't been striped recently, so no one really knows or just obeys that it exists. And those kind of striping projects are very small, grant magnitudes. It could be something quite as a bit larger, whereas Manchester received a grant through that Safe Routes to School program on the order of, I think it was $600,000, $700,000, which was much more structural, right? So that was parking lot changes. That was kind of ingress, egress from schools. It was more of an infrastructure-based grant. But part of their ability to go chase that was they're active in the Safe Routes to School program, and there was town support coming from Manchester, and also sometimes letters of support from the community, where if we get feedback from school family members saying, I'd really like to walk to school, but the cars are driving too fast, or there's no sidewalk and I need to walk in the street, or whatever their case may be, just having that direct community feedback that we can include in the grant writing application process helps to get our application scored more favorably. So certainly, Jenny, as you're saying, having broad town involvement, being involved in those future safer to school projects, collecting the data to show that there are people who currently walk and bike to school, but to show that there's a need, that if in the future there were more sidewalks, there were crosswalks or bike lanes, there's an unmet need currently within the town that building that infrastructure would be used in the future, would be highly beneficial for those future grant applications.
Can you let the people listening how to, and I know it was in an article in the newspaper of how, someone wasn't sure where to go to submit an issue, and I know there was a response on, where to go. But can you say again where the public can, or how the public can submit their concerns? How they can connect with the advisory board?
Yeah. We have a website on the town site at large. There's an email address that they can email us if they have concerns. I actually got an email from a Winthrop parent last night saying that they are on the Mineral Street neighborhood between Central and Washington, and the sidewalks in that area are essentially at the same grade as the street, so people park on the sidewalk, and so people, the students have to kind of walk or bike in the street because the sidewalk's not available to them anymore. So if you're trying to just directly contact us, that email address on the website is kind of the most direct approach. The police also have a non-emergency traffic email, and I think a phone number also. And then they can also contact planning too. We're not trying to bypass town resources by any means, but parents and anyone really within the town who feels like they would like to walk or bike or otherwise, move about their town without being in a car, and they're seeing roadblocks to being able to do that, we're out here to help kind of facilitate, understand their concerns and help facilitate trying to, identify the need and get resources to get that addressed.
Can I ask a couple questions? When you're talking about it sounds like a specific grant window, is that to MassDOT, or is that, when you're talking about the window closed, are you talking about grants in general or for a specific grant that you would be?
So I think it was maybe late September, early October timeframe, there's a couple grant periods that the MassDOT Safer to School program opens up. The October window it's a relatively small grant value. I think it was less than $10,000. And the structure of that grant opportunity is that the town has to commit the resources first, but once it's in place, if our grant application is approved, we get reimbursed from the state. So that is, again, where it's $10,000, again, it's not going to be structural infrastructure changes, but they're really looking for walk and bikeability improvements around the schools. So again, if you need striping of a crosswalk or one of the rapid flashing beacons that's maybe it's solar based and doesn't get enough sun, it needs to be kind of tied into town electricity, things like that generally falls within that $10,000 threshold. There are other grants that both MassDOT, Safer to School, and then MassDOT as a larger umbrella open up periodically throughout the year that are also larger in magnitude. So Manchester, with their more kind of structural infrastructure improvements, they applied for a different grant that was substantially larger than $10,000.
And then in terms of the list that you have provided already, how are you guys thinking about prioritizing these things or getting feedback from the boards in order to help inform how you do that?
Yeah. So my thought, and this is very much kind of off the cuff because we haven't gone through a formal framework to force rank or identify how each of those streets or projects should be addressed. I think we could go through the individual concern areas, and you could probably categorize them as kind of a low-hanging fruit type project. If it's just striping, or if it's a scrape and pave type project that might fall within the existing DPW list of projects, there may be projects that could be acted upon in the near term. And then we've had some feedback that, especially around 1A, from kind of the five corner sections of town south towards Hamilton, that there are variable width shoulders on the road, and it can be difficult to bike in some areas, and you don't have a contiguous sidewalk for that entire portion of 1A. That's a much more structural change. So I think if you were just to kind of collect the broad community feedback, you could categorize those different concern areas into, near-term, shorter duration projects, lower magnitude projects that could be acted upon earlier. And there may be, larger projects that need, state or federal resources in order to get them planned, maybe over a multi-year cycle. For something like a sidewalk over that length of 1A would probably be outside of the scope of just a single MassDOT project.
Yeah, and to add to that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, it just depends on the grant that's opened up, depending on which ones we can submit. So it may not be the first priority, but it's the, first priority in terms of the crosswalks being redone. So things could go out of order based on what the grant is for.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Yeah, you could also probably categorize them. If there are concern areas that are within a certain proximity of schools, that may apply for certain grant funding. Whereas, again, if thinking of the 1A sidewalk area, the further away you get away from schools, you may need to be a bit more particular about which grants you try to apply for that project.
Brian Hone, 29 Upper River Road. One more answer, though, to this. We met with the head of District 4, MassDOT, a couple of weeks ago, and he gave us a specific set of procedures to follow. And it starts with get all your boards together, get your priorities together, have your planning director submit that to this, set up a meeting with MassDOT through the planning director. And then in the words of the District 4 coordinator, hopefully this is on the record, he said, we will find the money at the state level because there's a lot of pots of money for sidewalks and stuff. What we have been lacking as a town for the last couple of years is a cohesive vision. So one of the hopes would be that especially your board and then the select board will come together and provide feedback on these lists and say, yeah, you didn't think about this spot, or that one's not a big deal, but kids can't walk over here. So I think the first thing is just to get the feedback from all the boards into one place, and then have a meeting at some point with reps from each board to try to priority rank them.
And you're anticipating that, like, in the spring?
I'd like to have that list together by the springtime, because really, as Brian had mentioned, the feedback we're getting from the state level is if we don't have a cohesive list, and if we don't have a vision from planning, and if we're just kind of chasing these individual grant opportunities, and we're, every 30-day window that opens up, we're trying to figure out what's the next priority and how do we go to apply for this grant, we've already lost. Right, so the earlier we can kind of get that list together, it's a living document, so it doesn't need to be, written in stone and never touched again. But at least if we can kind of coordinate the streets or the problem areas within the town that we'd like to focus on, we can circulate those with the school committee, and you can certainly add your feedback to those. We'd like to, continue working with planning and select board to get their feedback also. But if we get the list and it's kind of been reviewed, edited, beaten up enough that we all kind of agree on roughly the bounds of where the priorities are, then that just helps us, pursue future grant opportunities that do pop up.
Right? Good.
I have a couple, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say thank you for coming, and I think it's really smart to develop this list and be proactive. I'm sure you've thought of this, but consider like weighting them, or attaching a cost value, or like these are less than $5,000, these are $5,000 to $15,000, and these are more, because, like you said, the priorities might change if some of these seem like pretty low-hanging fruit, like just
Yeah.
painting a sidewalk, and some of them are, repaving massive roads, so just sort of thinking about that too. And I missed your group of collaborators, but I assume the police department is on that list too, in terms of public safety and sidewalks and
Yeah,
things?
so Officer Dave is, part of our group, but also we would like
I
to kind
missed
of
that.
continue working with police and fire to get their feedback also.
Okay. One other question, I guess, for our district. Is there any way we could provide data on, addresses of, or pockets of students, student-heavy intersections or areas that we might have to be able to provide some data-based?
Sure that we could find it?
And I'm thinking of bus
Yeah, we-
routes, but I guess that's not the point. It's the kids that don't take buses.
Civics class project that interviewed all the IMS kids on how they get to school and where they would like to walk. 2 years ago.
Okay.
We have those that were provided by those students.
Okay.
That's the only solid data we have. We have lots of data for adults. There's Strava Metro, which is these apps you can use when you're
Yeah.
biking and walking, and towns can subscribe to that data. We have that.
Okay.
But we obviously aren't going to ask our school-age kids to provide their tracking information.
Right. No, I mean, I'm just saying, we have student addresses and those, so I don't know if there's just any data that we could provide that could help, where kids live. And then, we can figure out, we know where kids want to go after school, either walking or biking, but.
I wonder too, like along those lines, if you could send out some kind of a survey. I know the rec department did an incredible survey last year and just asking for feedback from people in the community in terms of what kind of programming they'd like to see. And they got a tremendous amount of report, and they've put together quite a lot of data analysis around that, and it sort of has helped inform what kinds of programming they want to do. So I don't know if you're looking for feedback outside of just the board, something like that could be helpful.
We could probably circulate it.
Planning department, our new planning director is.
Yeah.
Alan, our new planning director, has run some of these kinds of programs before and has recommended that once we have a preliminary list in the spring, run a community workshop and, do some surveying and also allow folks to come in and have maps and look at, and really just start trying to beat up the list. And so we're working towards a springtime goal there. But any data you've got, we'd love it.
We'd like to have access to it, but I guess just to be explicit, I'd really like to see that data being managed by planning, because I think you would want town resources to manage that database. You don't want, town volunteers. Not that we would do anything
Yeah.
nefarious with it, but just that the data should be owned by the town.
So this list that you provided, this has been put together by your advisory board, and then you and I had discussions about it a few weeks ago, but how would you like feedback on this list from this particular school committee, and/or how do we get that feedback to you?
So,
If you want, you can send it to me,
sure.
and then I can bring it to the meeting.
Yeah, so procedurally, is that something that's waiting till the spring, or is that something you're looking?
Anytime.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And
We're
so
still
we
very much
have-
in a data gathering
We have a
mode.
school board rep.
Uh-huh.
You can work through Jenny, or, if you want us to come back, we'd come back and review your requested mods to the list, or additions, or priorities. You can attach if you think you have a priority order, by all means, we'll start building that into a ranking. So I would say first line of communication is through your rep to our board, and then we're happy to come in anytime you want.
All right, well, we will chat about it in 2025.
Yeah, at this phase, we're not trying to be very discriminating, right? It's a mix of our own feedback within the board, where we've gotten feedback, either an email or person or otherwise, from, families about town who are trying to walk to school or otherwise, and they've had difficulty doing that. And then, as Dr. Blake mentioned, we met previously and kind of gotten other feedback too. So at this point, it's just data gathering we're not trying to tell anyone to, go away or they're safe enough and we don't need to do anything to that street area. It's just collecting the data. And then I think in that spring timeframe, once we kind of have a critical mass of input, then we can go through the process of establishing a taxonomy of what do we do with this and how do we rank it so it's most useful for ourselves internally, for Alan and the planning department to plan future projects, for the DPW as MassDOT has TIP projects that come down the line to make sure that the town's needs are being addressed in those future TIP projects. And then to try to fill in the cracks, right? If there are grant opportunities that open up and a project kind of aligns nicely with the grant criteria, we already have the data, and maybe we could, filter the data and try to go chase that grant money.
One additional thing, and this is good, hopefully we get snow, and I say that because my kids want to sled. So, hopefully. Anyway, one of the things that we talked about at the meeting was where the snow is piled. And I know there was a concern last year about the snow was pushed against the bridge here. So the kids had to kind of walk a little bit on the street. So I know that's something that, we can keep our eyes out for, but that's also something that we can
Yeah, noting those,
talk about and encourage the town to rethink where they pile the snow.
noting those areas, I think, would be important.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one other quick question, looking at the list? Pine Fields to Doyon, where does that?
That's Linebrook Road. So when we fought for the sidewalk on Linebrook Road, after we passed 5 town votes to get that sidewalk, there was a compromise at the select board, which was, it was originally, the original warrant article called for a sidewalk the length of the road. And the compromise, just for fiscal reasons, was to stop at Doyon. So go from Lord Square to Doyon, but not continue it out to the Pine Fields neighborhood.
Yeah, 'cause
Which-
there's a lot of kids in
That's
the
a-
Pine Groves.
Yep, and
So-
especially if we're looking at potentially a school
Yeah.
out at Doyon, that sidewalk should be
Yep.
part of that plan.
So that Pine Fields area is Linebrook from Doyon outbound towards Route 1, maybe the 5 or 6 side streets right off of Linebrook to make sure that they have sidewalk access, because the sidewalk stops right around the Doyon campus and doesn't continue further outward.
Right, I think we're talking at least a couple hundred kids out there.
Yeah. Right.
Conversation's right on time. so-
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Jumping down, now we're at subcommittee, working group, and liaison reports. Budget. Have you, any updates
Budget
there?
hasn't met since the last school committee meeting, but we do have a meeting on Tuesday of next week with the administrative team as our first round of discussions for next year's budget.
Excellent. Communications.
We prepared, the newsletter for this month. If you want to take a second to look at that, it is in the meeting folder. While you're pulling that up, just a note about timing, because of the winter break and the way that our schedule falls. Unless there's any objections, our recommendation is we will send out the newsletter next week, next Tuesday. Usually it goes the last Tuesday of the month, so this will be a week early for us, but before the winter break, and then we'll adjust and figure out what's right for January. You'll see a good amount of it has been completed. There's some placeholders because some of it is waiting for some updates from this evening, as usual. I'll hit just the topics while you're scanning through. Let me know if there's general feedback. There's still some language changes we'll finalize over the next day. First is a sort of end-of-the-year letter from the board. Next is the update on the elementary school building project. We've prepared that in anticipation of being accepted, should we be tomorrow, or invited into the program. Following up on the presentations from the administrative team at the last meeting, and in the spirit of the updates that we've had monthly in these, there's a section about talking about restorative justice in general for awareness. And then as we've continued to do, it's what it is, a little bit of a call to action for families, something you can think about or a question to ask of your children, and then additional information should you want to know more about it. That was a good connection to something that the schools are already pursuing, which has been the spirit of these all along. I just added a note about the fall sports awards. It's great to hear those, and so something we typically include, so I just added that section. Brian, when you get a second, if you could share the list, we'll make sure it gets into the newsletter. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Our usual activities and accomplishments, and then our end of the year calendar of events for the end of December and then into January. Any questions?
I have an
Comments? Yes, please.
addition, I think, for the activities and accomplishments is visiting Swampscott.
So,
No?
good, yes, so we were gonna talk about that, but given the potential for the news tomorrow, we wanted to kind of keep the focus on that, and we thought we would kind of recap our discussion about Swampscott in the January
Oh, fine.
newsletter.
Okay.
It was an accomplishment, though.
It was.
It was. Driving to Swampscott is an accomplishment.
It was an accomplishment.
I didn't even drive. Being a passenger for that.
That looks good. The newsletter looks good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I like the Fall Sports Award edition.
And then in addition to that, something we talked about at communications was pending good news tomorrow. Want me to say? That will kind of release the section about the MSBA as like a standalone email tomorrow.
That, who's writing that? Oh, that
It's
little blurb?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we think typically do a press release, so we would copy that or link to that.
With the blurb that's currently in there as the header.
Yeah.
Yes.
To the whole district.
Yeah, like everybody who gets our newsletter and everything would go to that group
Great.
in an email.
Just administratively, the one thing to consider if you haven't already on that call, should we be just an announcement to the boards would also be a good action for us to take for you to take.
Yeah.
Was that?
Announcement to the
here.
boards, share that update to the town
Oh,
boards, letting
yeah.
them know.
Town manager, town
Yeah.
board.
Yeah. On it.
Okay. Well, it sounds like they'll be on the meeting.
It's true, you have representation.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
staff, I think that you're,
It'll go out in I'll mention it in my newsletter tomorrow afternoon.
okay. All right,
That is it for communications.
right. Usual concerns?
Waiting for date to have a meeting.
Okay. Negotiations wrapped up. Operations is, I think, all good so far, so good, right? Or anything new there? Okay. Policies meeting next week. FEFI's policy working group.
We just met a couple of hours ago. Ooh, we're making good progress. We're really spending time reworking the process more than our policy, because we think the process will inform the policy. I know I've said this before, but I do feel like we're making good progress. So Diana is working on looking into the sort of revamping the application for the paying grants, and I am looking into revamping the website content, because I think a lot of it's sort of redundant and a little bit too much information. So we're trying to sort of streamline things and make the sort of sifting through the information on the website easier, and it's just streamlining the whole application process. So our plan is to keep working on that. Dr. Blake's also looking into some of the technology pieces, like if we could do like maybe a Dropbox and then link it to DocuSign to get, so the applicants can have all the required signatures sequentially, and talking about deadlines and things. So tonight we talked about continuing that work, but also reaching out to the paying grant committee perhaps and try to nail down the dates for this coming spring, and introduce a new role for them, which would involve the end of year reporting. So if the grants get approved in the spring, sort of the following spring when so you get the grant and then you have sort of the following school year to use it on whatever program, sort of tying up the end-of-year reporting form and collating those and what those might look like on the website. So nothing really to report yet, but we are plowing through things. And Haley, you and I had talked about maybe meeting with Peter Genolfi about, because he's the chair of the Pain Grant Committee, and sort of talking to him about the process too, how it went last year and what he could do differently this year maybe.
I just sent him an email to schedule a meeting early January.
And you can talk about timeline, or you'll talk to him about potentially wiggling the timeline.
Yeah, we could cover that. And I think we maybe need to talk to Laura a little bit too about if we do bump up the application deadline, we didn't really roll that back to when it would, like it might open mid-February. So we'd have to sort of see if we could pull that off and have the application and the website stuff up by then. But
Lots to do.
lots to do.
Great. Elementary school building project working group. Have you guys met or gonna meet?
We haven't met, we can talk about the Swampscott, but just maybe two quick administrative things. One, since we went to the tri-board, there's been questions from the town and board about model schools in a good way, because I think we're getting interest. Just want to reiterate that the school committee intends to study model schools in partnership with the MSBA. It's actually a normal part of the feasibility process, so we'll go through that with them, should we be accepted or invited in. And then the next big thing for us is, should we be invited in, becoming familiar with the timeline, major activities, major steps that we need to be responsible for. That's a conversation for January, but that's where we'll go next.
Okay.
Can I make one request too? I did start kind of, I know at the last meeting we talked about trying to get ahead of the FAQ thing. So I've been combing through websites and starting to put a list together. But if people want to email me individually, any questions that like you have been asked frequently, that would be helpful for just like, because there are some things on other school websites that really are not applicable to us or specific to those towns and their processes. There are some that are general that I am including, but anything that feels very like Ipswich centric.
Just about school building project.
Yeah, just questions
anything?
like as you're out and about, like
Okay.
things that people have asked you, what I think would be helpful to try to include, at least in the initial round of us trying to kind of vet some of what that content might look like.
That's a great idea. And at one point, I had thought I would do something similar, and I never did. But if, I'm happy to comb back through like the listening session. There were like a lot of themes that came up in those, and I was like, oh, we should just have like a simple answer to that
Right.
question that keeps resurfacing. So can look into that too.
Yeah.
Inspired.
Yeah, that's a good.
Because there's a whole round of families that weren't here, and so
Yeah.
they don't know that historical, like, why do we need a project in the first place?
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah. So anything, just feel free to send it to me. That'd be great.
Excellent. Love that. All right. Next. I think Dr. Blake reported on turf. I don't know that you have do you have anything to add?
No,
Okay.
nothing to add.
Okay. And I,
Field met.
Great.
They're excited
love
to
that.
extend the money.
And then any other liaison reports?
Yeah, IEF met last Monday, and they continued to, do some great work, kind of filling in some gaps, where some of the other things in town that are available kind of maybe are too big, or they didn't get funding from that. They are going on a big fundraising push, and they're putting out also an invitation for people who might want to be on the board and contribute to it as well. So I think you'll be seeing some, I think they said it was going to be in the newspaper, but I'm not sure if that's happened yet or not. I don't think I saw it yesterday, but encouraging people to either, if they wanted to contribute, or be on the board and be part of their process. I think they're really trying to be as public as they can to rebuild the image in a much more positive way, so.
Strategic Planning Committee met on the 10th. So just to update people, because I know we all heard about it at the tri-board. So some things that have been changed and added to the model are not really related to the schools in particular, but a lot of, there's a column about basically things, so it's how much, so it's all the projects, how much they cost, but then there's like the grant column that was sort of blank. So they filled that in based on some discussions with the DPW. So it seems like a lot of the DPW line items might be pretty substantially grant funded, which is nice. They also wanted me, this is where it came up, that the middle school, high school boiler and athletic complex, which I think is the turf carpet, is now potentially going to be on the capital plan. So they wanted me to check with you or us. There's a couple things in the strategic plan that are redundant. So like new elementary school roofs are on the strategic plan. Do we want to take those off? So we put the 5 to 7 year roofs on a year ago. But they're only 5 to 7 years. So on the strategic plan currently are full repairs of the elementary school roofs. I think we can take that off the strategic plan, but I don't know. That's sort of up for discussion.
Yeah.
What? It's sort of up for discussion.
Right.
We don't have to decide right
Yeah,
now, but
so,
that
I mean,
is something that we
my-
would need to decide.
My gut reaction to that is no. We can't take it off. Because we could go through this entire process again
Yep.
and have a failed vote. And then in 7 years, we need roofs on those two schools.
Right.
And then won't have it in a strategic plan. It'll be lost in space somewhere, and there won't be any discussion about how we're going to fund this now. But if it's in the plan, then there's an awareness. And if
That's a good point.
if we end up in a different position where we have a past vote and we're digging holes for a new building, then those will fall off and we won't have to worry about them.
Can they just indicate that on there, that there would be a little asterisk there that says this would roll off if the school?
Probably. I mean, and it's not, I don't think anyone's envisioning the strategic plan to be set in stone. I mean, things are going to
And
fail at
similar-
town meeting, pass town meeting. All of these projects are, up for voter
And
decisions.
And two, if, similarly, the capital plan, we have a lot of things in the capital plan that
Might not make the
are
capital plan.
impacted by, that would be impacted by a new, a building project that we'll be able to pull right off the capital plan.
I think it's interesting, I hadn't thought about it the way you're saying it, but if you do that, it kind of like will help spell out the do-nothing approach,
Correct.
what that would cost, and what that investment would or wouldn't look like.
Okay. And then also on that is the middle school, high school VRF system is also on the strategic plan. And I guess they weren't sure if that would still be needed if we do the boiler replacement sooner rather than later.
I think so. I think the systems are separate.
Okay. Because the VRF system would be electrification and involve heating and cooling, I believe. That's not on the plan till 2030. So again, that's just a place that there's like a little bit of redundancy, and maybe that's okay. But I told them I'd bring that back to you. So, I did.
And the policy subcommittee's meeting next Tuesday. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. All right. Anybody else? All right, next, high school representative report.
So I don't have much to report. People are excited for Christmas break, which will be happening pretty soon. People are also kind of bummed there's a lot of tests before Christmas break, which is understandable. We are very fortunate this year that we have an extra long Christmas break because of how Christmas falls. We do have to come back on a Thursday and a Friday, which isn't great, but we have some extra days off, so it's okay. We plan to do a survey with the Student Advisory Council on Tuesday during advisory. We reached out to Dunkin' Donuts in Topsfield because they actually donate to us, and hopefully we'll get some munchkins from them, and we'll go around advisory, give a kid a munchkin in exchange for filling out a survey. So that's the plan, because otherwise they won't fill out surveys. We've tried. And yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Finance report, please.
Okay. And good evening, all. There were three documents in your folder tonight. The monthly revolving fund and stabilization account balances, the general fund or the operating budget monthly report, and the budget timeline as the most recent version where we are at this time. Call your attention to the monthly budget report, and we are progressing well and as planned. You see, if we just cut to the chase, to the bottom line on page 28, we have expended about 46.5% of the budget, meaning obviously the balance, the 54%, is remaining to be spent. We will be at the 6-month point, at the end of this month, at the end of December. So we're actually, as of now, probably a little underspending. And the reason for that, you will see a very different number in a month from now, because we will have hit by the end of this month all of the retro payments for the teachers. We have made our retroactive payments for the collective bargaining agreements for the custodians, for the clerical, for the paraprofessionals, and for the RBTs. And our plan is, we're working toward actually it's the next pay period is December 26th. And at that time, we'll hit the last two bargaining groups, which would be the Unit A members and the food service staff. So the Unit A members obviously being the largest piece of that, and the retroactive payments for fiscal year '25, as we know, are 3%. So that number, that remaining balance, will be very different, in a month. So that is both good news as well as an appreciation that we continue to spend on pace, if not slightly under, with an appreciation that we need that 3% window for the Unit A members. So that's really that budget report. The other document, the monthly revolving fund stabilization balances. There is nothing interesting, which is the good news. Nothing interesting to report there. Some of the balances are down, as you will see, but that just has to do with really end of season spending, for example, athletics being one. We haven't begun to really, hit the uptick in fees yet for coming in for the winter seasons, but we have a lot of bills to pay as we're closing the season. So there's nothing really interesting, which is the good news. The revolving funds remain healthy and as planned. And as I said, and the third document is the budget calendar as it was most recently updated, which is now about a month ago. I think it's dated November 15th.
Thank you. So when, is this final, or when will this be final? The calendar, sorry.
Well, it's final as far as I'm concerned. There are a couple, parts that the town could change on us, but everything that we, the district, are doing is contained in that. And as Dr. Blake mentioned earlier, and even Peter, when he was speaking earlier, we are actively in the throes of building the budget, the fiscal '26 budget, on the administrative side. So everything in that document on our end is progressing on pace. Things that are outside of our control may certainly move around, but I haven't had an indication of any changes since probably a month ago when the town finance director gave me sort of an update at the time.
Okay, so update our calendars.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions for Tom? All right, thank you. All right, now we are at our elementary school building project and school tour discussion. So we already heard about exciting call tomorrow. And then we'll be in touch with the other boards and perhaps, touch upon it again at our next tri-board. Any other general discussion points before we jump into the tour? Okay. So, like I said, we can go around the room. I don't know if you were not there, or do you have something to say?
Just
Yeah.
quick comment, part of the, we had discussed it in addition with our previous visits. This is not just about like physical layout, what color the walls, do we like the aesthetic? The four things in particular that we had discussed, that I know everyone went into looking for, so I'm saying this mostly for anybody watching or listening at home. The first was physical space and layout, but how does that contribute to the learning environment, right? So not like I like that they used and put windows here and there. The second was flexible and adaptive environments. How do they make sure that they can best meet the varying and vast needs of students and administrative team? The third was safety, security, and accessibility. And then the fourth was the design, aesthetic, outdoor space, and does it meet the specific, and how did they address the specific needs and environment and culture of the town and incorporate that into the building. So just wanted to note that. That's the general guidelines we had all talked about and think about going into the tour. Thanks.
Excellent. Want to kick it off, Matt?
Kick it off.
All right.
It was, no, I was only at the Gloucester one before this, so I missed the first two. But, for me, it was the first time I think I've seen a building and a project that seemed to kind of be much more in line with what we might be facing and expect, in terms of school size, in terms of some of the challenges they had faced, and they had a failed vote and so on and so forth. So for me, this was kind of a really neat, much more apples to apples kind of experience. Gloucester had similar, but they were smaller, I think a lot of people, when you pull up to the building, it was rather large from the outside, but I was really impressed by how the inside felt very warm and comfortable. I loved how they did the neighborhoods to make it kind of a lot of shared space and flexible space that they had, that they could be used for multiple different purposes. And I thought their superintendent, who I'm blanking on her name right now. Pam.
Angelakis.
Was really, really helpful and instrumental in kind of talking us through the challenges that they had to kind of go through, both from a town perspective, but also bringing together different cultures. And I always just sort of assumed in my head students would be the hardest one, but she was like, no, it's teachers, right? Getting teachers kind of bound together in a way that makes them think as a whole, perhaps maybe not so much from the school that they came from. When she said that, it kind of triggered something in me that was like, yeah, we can be potty, the way teachers kind of move around together in their own sort of groups. But obviously they have a parking problem. And I think they're trying to solve that problem, but that was kind of, immediately I was like thinking to myself, that's something that you really do have to figure out. Otherwise, because certainly a Joy on-site, if we end up with one school there, there's no street parking, for example. We couldn't kind of pull off what we did. So there was a few sort of challenges that they had that I thought were something that we really needed to think about as well. But overall, I really loved going there and seeing it, and because it really did feel like this is something that connects back to us. And so anyways, I thought it was great.
Excellent.
Okay, I wrote down some things. I wrote likes, dislikes, and likes a lot. And I also want to just echo what Matt has already said. It felt like this is what we needed to see. They had so many similarities in their town. They had a failed vote. They had, I think, some differences, like their 3 square miles were one of the larger geographies in the state, so that they are similar populations. So I don't want to get in the weeds of that, but when I wrote down my comments, I had a hard time not thinking about these relative to the other schools we saw. So I'll maybe insert that a little bit. But things I really liked. I also liked the neighborhood hallways and the themes that they had. And then I think relative to Amesbury, who did it a little differently, but I did like the neighborhoods. I really like the conference room lobby access and proximity to the office, not the classrooms, and it was thoughtful about, this is where we can meet with parents without them having to come down the hallway into where the children are. And they can meet administratively as well, but I thought the conference room where we met, like the way the lobby was set up, was very thoughtful. I really liked the stage and cafeteria with the convertible seating and centrally located in the building, so it was just beyond the lobby, so each wing could get to it. I liked the gym, but that's also on the dislikes and likes a lot for different reasons. But I thought the gym was thoughtful, but there's some things that could be done differently. Okay, dislikes. The scale of the building. So the common areas in the neighborhoods that I thought Amesbury did really well were just larger, like more square footage. And I felt a little bit like, this is a lot of square footage for small children. I thought the neighborhoods were done a little bit nicer in Amesbury.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm trying to remember. I think in Amesbury, was it like it was a hallway and they kind of had like a sub-neighborhood and a sub-neighborhood where this one, it was all
Yeah,
one? Is that the difference?
It
Okay.
felt big. Were the cubbies outside in Amesbury? Like, did that make it seem more, because I know you can have cubbies in the room or cubbies out.
Photos, but
We'll have to go back and look.
Because I agree, Amesbury did feel, oh, sorry, it's not my turn, but.
just the scale of the hallways in that space felt larger, larger than Amesbury, but maybe larger than it needed to be. But I'll get back to it at the end, because I have a thought about that. So I thought the overall size for a K through 4 was interesting, and like we're looking at a pre-K through 5 combination or consolidation, and it was a really big K through 4. Like they do their preschool at the middle school and their 5th grade in the middle school. So I just thought that was, 9 sections is a lot per grade level. Although I really like the cafeteria, I thought it was very large and it can fit over 400 people at once. And having 2 lunches with 400 people at that age group is not where I think elementary kids should be having lunch. The outside space, there was no grass area. It was pretty much in the middle of a neighborhood. I don't think, it would probably be the equivalent of putting that size building at Winthrop. And there was barely any outside space. Wasn't ideal. Not enough parking. The media center, although it was cool because it was 2 levels, seemed kind of empty. It didn't seem warm or as good as it could have been. And then the lobby, although well thought out, felt very large. I just felt like there was a lot of square footage, like in the hall space, that I know we have a problem in Ipswich in our elementary schools, that the hallways are so narrow and not ideal, but this one felt oversized. All right, like a lot. I loved the kindergarten classrooms, just having the cubbies inside. Each one had a restroom inside. They were just awesome, awesome learning space. I really liked the music and band instrumental room being separate and large and functional, but next to each other, and with really cool technology, microphones. Like a lot, the 9,000 square foot gym, and they paid for 3,000 extra square feet because they wanted it a certain size. So we know with value engineering, it was a more expensive gym than what would have come with the school. I really like that there's bulletproof glass on the lower level. Hate saying that, but I like it. The security system at the entrance, I thought was excellent. What was I going to say about so what I also really liked was their superintendent. I thought it was obvious that she brought the leadership that project needed. I think the building got built because the community came together. And it sounds like, after a failed vote, similar to ours, and it sounds like she was able to bring the administrators, the teachers, and the community together to get that passed. So my take home after doing all 4 tours is that the MSBA works with towns to get what is best for each town. So when I say like the large space, and like Amesbury just did such a good job of like the colors and the themes, and you know exactly where you were in the building. And I think Swampscott maybe didn't utilize that as much, but they got what they needed for their town. So my take-home is that Swampscott has a lot of similar issues that Ipswich has had, some very similar, but that the MSBA will work with Ipswich the way they worked with each of these towns to get us what we need. I'm glad I went. It was a really good trip.
Yes, it was.
Fun company.
Great. Haley, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'll go through the email Sasha sent to try to focus my thoughts around these specific things. So in terms of physical space and layout, again, also really love the neighborhoods. And I think having a flexible space in the center, and then additional smaller group rooms as well within these little pods really created the opportunities for specialized learning and individual and small group activities. Certainly just overall, the layout, having the cubbies in the rooms, so that the kids can get the stuff that they need throughout the day easily, that kind of thing, just makes a lot of sense for how the space functions and for efficiency, all of that stuff. I think those things also lend themselves to adaptive environments. Down in the kindergarten wing, they had a quiet room, which was so cool. It had beanbag chairs and some little smaller seating or something for movement and that kind of thing. So clearly they were really thinking about sort of inclusive environments that, again, were close by and that could be accessible and really age appropriate. For safety and security, same, the bulletproof glass. Just having at both entryways, having the vestibules that you walk into, that was just, you felt secure coming in. And I think, again, also how the administrative offices were laid out in between. So whether you came in on the K through 2 side or the 3 through 4 side, you could access that space. And I know this isn't really sort of something that we're talking about highlighting, but Pam did spend some time explaining to us what their administrative structure was and how intentional she was in advance of trying to prep for some of those transitions, which I think probably helped their whole team thinking about how, not just like when the new school opens, this is what it's going to look like, but what's the lead up to that. And I think even just having the shared offices, once they open, probably all of her whole process around that seemed, from her thinking about how it would be structured to the actual physical space, like there was a translation there or correlation there. Anyway. Yeah, the technology integration was insane. I mean, in every room, like just the huge screens, the microphones, as we said, I couldn't help but feel, walking around sort of thinking, what would have happened if in 2018 we had a school, that are like, just all of these things were incredible. For accessibility, the elevator right in the front lobby there, those kinds of things. Design and aesthetics. I really liked their theme. They had ocean, sand, and woods, which obviously felt very like I could picture it applying to us here. I agree with what Jen said. There were definitely periods where I was a little disoriented in the building. Like feeling like the visuals could have been a little stronger in terms of reminding, like, where are we? Are we in kindergarten? Are we in second? That kind of thing. So I felt like I liked the idea of the theme, but I think it could have been more present. I liked how intentional they were about having the cafeteria and the gym centralized, and then choosing to move the music rooms a little further away, where she did say, obviously, that would require a longer transition time for some kids, but they thought the benefits outweighed the negatives there in terms of just noise and being separate. So they obviously were just very intentional about the choices that they made, and I think it was obvious. And I think just overall, she was clearly so proud of the space that they had, and she was so enthusiastic, and I think my biggest takeaway was, this is such a huge opportunity for us, and I hope that we are able to bring the same level of, energy and all of, I mean, it's really, really exciting. And obviously I didn't go on any of the other school tours, but just seeing that one space, it just felt like hope and possibility, so. Good. Good.
So, it was great. I liked that it was a beautiful setting, like, there was so much woods. And Doyon, obviously, the site Doyon, same thing. And they had a lot of windows, which is great. They incorporated some options for outside, not on the ground too, but from the classroom. They had the garage door that we've seen in other schools that could open and the kids could go out. It could be an extended area. So I can see that as something we could do. I like the classroom size and what was in it, as Jen had mentioned, with the bathrooms, the kindergartens with the bathrooms, the cubbies inside. The stage in the cafeteria and the seating. I got strangely excited about the seating. I was like, we have to do this.
Exciting. The benches.
Yeah. I liked that the gym can be divided into 3 sections. They had like a mesh divider. I would think, this is getting into the weeds, a solid divider, right, would be good, because then you're not complicating the other, there could be 2 gym classes going on, or 3 gym classes going on. So a solid divider, that can be pulled down, I think would be great. Would be more time efficient if you could have more classes at the same time without interfering. So I thought that was good. And it could also, they had options, alternative classrooms. So what was it, the STEM room? That if a class wanted to do experiments, the teacher, I believe it was, because it wasn't staffed. So the classroom teacher would bring the kids to the special room, and they could do experiments and things like that. I thought that was cool, having, those additional spaces for flexibility. I think the size was big, I thought, but the ground also went up. It was like not on a hill, but like it went up a little bit, so that even made it seem a little larger. But I did think it was large for that age group. It was built for 900. There was, 750 currently, like something like that. It was built for 900. Is it about 750 that we have? Something like that. So that was 20% more. So I don't know what the MSBA would approve, or what they suggest the percentage would be for, like, to grow. But that would be 900. That would be a comparable. And it's hard. There's a lot of similarities that has been said. There's a couple of differences that I think we would really have to figure out, and I'm sure it's been thought of, and I have to dig more into the thoughts on buses and how they approach Doyon with the one street with just, just Linebrook. They have 2 buses. We would have 6 plus whatever walkers are currently at Winthrop. So that would maybe an extra bus. So it's just something it wasn't necessarily a concern for them. There's going to be things that aren't a concern for us, that were a concern for them. So I thought that was something, and also the size. It is 3 square miles compared to our 33 square miles. So that's something to think about too. But overall, I thought, and I know the space was smaller than ideal for them, but I thought they did a lot with the space that they had, and they're working with the church that's around the corner. But they're working with the community to try to come up with other solutions, and that seems to be going well. So, takes a village, as they say. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. I enjoyed our tour as well. Like Matt said, it was sort of the closest school that we visited that seemed closest to what we might have been talking about doing most often. Obviously, the community has a lot of similarities to ours. The size is similar. It was laid out in a lower school and an upper school with combined, I'm not telling you guys this, I'm telling this to whoever's listening. Upper school, lower school with sort of combined stuff in the middle, like the library and the gym. And, I know we had talked about that. And it was very distinct when you drove up. I agree. I was like, whoa, this is big. Just visually, it's a large school. But I didn't feel like that once I went in, and particularly where the students would be most of the time in the individual classrooms in the neighborhoods, it didn't feel large anymore. So that was nice. And also when you pulled up, I liked that there was 2 really distinct entrances. One was yellow, the green one was 3-4, and it was very, it was a big green awning and it said 3-4. And there was a big yellow awning that said K2. It was very clear, sort of 2 distinct entrances, which I liked. Yeah, so just a little bit more on the neighborhoods for anybody listening. It was set up, these sort of neighborhoods of 4 classrooms, and then sort of another classroom that was maybe a pull-out room with this flex space in the middle. And so each grade level has 8 or 9 sections. So each floor, so in, say, the side of the building that's 3-4, the first floor was like music and band and administration and things. And then the second floor was the whole 3rd grade. So a neighborhood and then some bathrooms and then another neighborhood. So the 3rd grade would essentially be on that's sort of their floor. And then they'd go down for lunch or gym or specials or whatever. And then the 4th grade was on a floor. And then on the other side of the building, through a different entrance, was the kindergarten clusters and then the 1st grade cluster. So it felt very well laid out. And sort of what at least I had been sort of envisioning for us. And let's see, I similarly liked the colored sort of tiles and, I don't know if it's called wayfinding, but just sort of, there was like a little starfish here that clearly was like some grade. And then there was a little seahorse when you walked onto that floor. And when you were in the lower school, all the tiles were sort of green. And when you were in the upper school, they were all yellow. And so it wasn't perfect, but I think if you spent probably more than a couple hours there, I think you'd get a good sense of where you were based on the tiles and the sort of symbols that were around. I liked the library as well. It had 2 floors with an adjoining staircase, so sort of like a lower school library and an upper school library. But it didn't seem closed off. I mean, she had said specifically, like, if you have a 2nd grader that's at a 4th grade reading level, they can just pop upstairs and grab a book and come back down. It's fine. So it seemed very just thoughtfully designed in that way.
She said, I'll just jump in there too, she did say for books, like she had books for both grade levels, not as heavily represented on both levels, but that she did have some other, so like even outside of leveled reading, like if the kindergartners were up on the second floor, like they had access to materials that would be appropriate.
So I liked that piece of it. Let's see what else. And just, I think they were really smart with community building and sort of strategic planning around their administrative team and staffing. And, you know, it was clear that the superintendent had been thinking about this through the whole process. I mean, how are we going to do the transition? How are we going to build support? How am I going to rearrange my administrative team? And she just really put a lot of thought and planning into it. And I think some of the spaces felt a little sparse, but they haven't been in there that long either. So, you know, I do think part of that is just, it's not lived in for that long. So I think, you know, the library and stuff will fill up over time. But yeah, back to the superintendent, just, I think, just really, I think we could learn a lot from their district. They did tons of tours for staff and families and just seemed really thoughtful in their approach. And I think we could really learn a lot from them. So, so yeah, I think it was, I think we've learned something from each of our visits, and we're sort of honing in on, I mean, I haven't talked about safety and things because those are sort of just, they're baked in, they're all amazing. The technology is amazing, the safety is amazing. It's all going to be great. So I'm just trying to tease out what I think was specific about Swampscott. And I think we're getting, it was nice to see a large school that had a similar layout to what we've been talking about somewhat.
Can I add one other thing too? I forgot to mention this. She did say that the firm that they ended up hiring facilitated a lot of community forums. Again, obviously that they came into this with a similar dynamic in terms of, you know, some discord around a combined school and that kind of thing. So they were really pleased with having the opportunity to continue to host those forums throughout the process to get that feedback and to really think about how to integrate people's concerns or to solve for them if possible. So that was really reassuring to hear that that company that they worked with did a really nice job of helping facilitate those things throughout the process.
All right. I'll add in a couple comments, since I agree with most of what's been said. I'm glad we all seem to be reporting favorably on it. I think for me, you know, we've been talking conceptually, like, sure, you can build a school for the size we need and make it feel small, but seeing this school made me see, in fact, that absolutely can be done. Like, I agree, like, pulling up, I was like, it is on a hill, so I hadn't thought about that if that impacted that experience. But once you walked in, I think, like everybody said, everything was so intentional, everything was laid out so well, everything just felt cozy. I think we liked a lot of what we saw in Amesbury and Gloucester, and I think in my mind I was like, if only we could do this with 2 wings, and that's kind of what Swampscott did. Let's see what else has been said. We talked about that there were minimal travel times between the common areas, and also like the idea that if 3rd grade was going to lunch, they don't have to walk by a whole other grade to get to lunch. So it really, I think, and the superintendent said that the noise level had not been a problem. Let's see. They were intentional with their special education spaces. She mentioned that they put them near the gym and were able to then offer like adaptive physical education programs. Talked about safety, green, geothermal, very cool. And then it was really interesting as she described their process and how they made a promise to their community about the cost and were able to uphold their commitment to staying within budget. And on time, yeah. A couple things that, and we've talked about the similarities and differences between our town and theirs. You know, the parking that they had, or that they didn't have is a problem, and that they didn't have like a community space for parents or families who were able to walk their drive and pull up and, hang out for a minute before school. I looked it up. From what I can tell, their lot was about 6 acres, so very similar to Winthrop. Doyon is 17, so I'm not an engineer, but I'm hopeful that some of those issues that they're having, we would, like you said, might not be an issue here. Let's see, some other things that she spoke about. You said, like, having the staff between all the schools get together. I think that's been an intention of yours and throughout the district, is to have, more collaboration between the schools. I think we're on our way with that, so that's a good thing. And she also mentioned having their PTOs collaborate, and I think we know that the Winthrop and Doyon Fries already do a lot of collaboration. So we're in a good place, and it was an awesome tour.
Yeah, so I think, I just, from the outset, I love the building, I love the site. It was a tight site. We had conversations, the last building project here, about the site being tough in terms of layout and design, but clearly the site, what we have, is much larger than the space that they had available to them. They had the woods on one side, but then the other 3 sides were surrounded by a neighborhood. And so it was a very tight campus, which to some degree added to the safety and security, in that there weren't long driveways to fly up or anything like that. It was all pretty tight on the outside in terms of fencing and safety and security things. I think Pam, in her presentation to us, looked at 3 or 4 different issues. One was the building itself and how that building came together, and all the different spaces, the neighborhoods, et cetera. And we saw that some of the similar things in the other buildings that we saw. I like the configuration that they had, the sort of the upper and lower. I think that's sort of what the general thinking is for our administrators and teachers here. I think that they did a great job in terms of the technology in the building. She did talk about having to value engineer things, but there were a number of things that she refused to give up, and they were integral in the building. The modern technology, the high safety standards, just the thought that went into the layout. Again, to Jen's point about you walk in and you're in a locked vestibule, but once you're admitted to the building, the conference room was right inside the door. You didn't have to walk anywhere to have meetings and things like that. I think those kinds of things will be important to keep in mind. The geothermal plant, high efficiency systems throughout. I love the gym and cafeteria spaces. They were large, no doubt. And the way they run their schedule there, they have 2 lunches. I don't know that we necessarily have to have 2 lunches, right? So, but the space is there, and that space was sort of a cafetorium, if you will, in that they had the stage there with a lift on it, and they could do full performances there, which I like. We don't have the space to do that in our elementary schools. The second piece that Pam talked about was the staff and the culture, and bringing the 2 schools together, getting them working together. When they eventually did come together in that building, they were all mixed up. They weren't, one side of town and the other side of town in classrooms or in their teams. Everybody worked together, and so I think that was a conscious decision that worked well. They built a shared culture for that building. To Kate's point earlier, they did once the building was up, they did a lot of tours and things when it was safe to enter the building, right? Because during construction, it's pretty much off limits. But when it was safe to enter the building, they did a lot of community tours. so people knew that building before they even opened the doors in late August to start school. And this is the first year, so it's empty because they haven't, they've only, they only put into that building what was in the budget for that building. So in other words, they didn't bring anything with them from the other two buildings. Everything was new. So, and there is a budget in the furniture, fixture, FF&E. Furniture, fixture, and equipment that allows for that in the budgeting. I think it's important as we go forward to think about all of these things collectively that we liked or didn't like, and understand that when we go to design our own building, we can make the hallways a little bit narrower if we think that it was still too big. We can bring in different pieces that are going to make it Ipswich, right? So I think we can take the best of what we saw in not only Swampscott, but the other buildings that we toured, look at the worst and say, ooh, we don't want to go there, and put that to our use. That's it. I think if that was a model school, I'd say build it tomorrow.
I have a couple more that have come up since other people have, if that's okay.
What's that?
I have a couple other comments that have
Don't
popped
quote me
into
on
my
that,
head.
Trevor. He looked at me and smiled and started typing.
Okay. So just a couple of other things that popped into my head. One of the questions I had submitted previously to Dr. Blake was about sort of collaboration between the two schools, and the superintendent mentioned, oh yeah, like we still do kindergarten, they do like K-4 kindergarten buddies, and they still do that, so that is possible. So that's good. I mean, it seems like they're distinct schools, but there's some, they see each other, and there's some sort of thoughtful collaboration between the lower grades and the upper grades, which I thought was nice. I was surprised there was no mention, and we didn't ask about it, but we did ask, is there anything you would do differently? And she said nothing. She's like, really? That was good. But she didn't mention anything about noise or like flow of students. Like, that's a lot of students, and I was thinking we might hear like the cafeteria is really loud, or we're still trying to work out the flow of this many kids getting from here to there, but nothing was mentioned, which doesn't mean they don't have problems, but I was just surprised that, and I didn't think to ask about it beforehand.
Well, I mean, we were there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Saw kids, but
on a
not-
school day, I didn't see any,
We didn't see a lot of kids.
we didn't, right, that's my
Jim?
point, right?
Because the size of the school is definitely larger than the amount of kids that are there, so maybe that was helpful with the flow.
Yeah, I mean, I was just surprised that it wasn't,
Yeah.
it didn't seem to be an issue,
Right.
whereas some of the other schools we visited seemed to still be wrestling with like,
Yeah.
I can't remember which school, but some schools were like, the cafeteria is just, it's a little crazy at lunchtime, so there's a lot of kids, or just trying to get kids from A to B with a lot of
I'm
kids.
sure a
is
lot of that has
challenging.
to do with the scheduling.
Yeah, they just seem to have it nailed down, which was
Yeah,
impressive for
yeah.
only having been in there for a few. So I don't know if that was a design of the building, or they had put a lot of thought into it, or what, but I just thought that was notable in that this was the biggest school we visited, and we didn't hear about those sorts of issues. I just found that interesting.
I did hear her say that noise, according to her, noise had not been an issue.
I mean, it was also the superintendent, so
Yeah.
maybe the principal would have been a more appropriate person who's in there all day, every day.
The other piece is that Pam invited us back if we had additional follow-up questions or wanted to see or invite perhaps other town officials to go on another tour at some point. So I just want to make that
Yeah,
offer.
it might be nice to have it with an administrator. I mean, I loved the superintendent, but the building administrator that's in there all day might.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that was my next thing I wanted to follow up about, like how soon can we get that done?
I can call her tomorrow, but I don't know.
Is that what everybody's saying, like
mean,
over
is
the
it-
next, obviously get through the
in
holidays,
Yeah, in
but like,
January, we can,
yeah.
I can call her and,
To get what done?
to have another group potentially go over there for a tour.
Of like town boards and Sasha?
Maybe, a couple members from Select Board Finance Committee, and I'd love for, like, teachers, staff,
maybe some
admins.
teachers, yeah.
I'd love to hear
Yep.
some teacher feedback from Ipswich.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
My question is, so it says it's built for 900, they have 750. Does that mean that they don't use some classrooms, or they just have low kids in class? They just don't use some classrooms? Oh,
Right.
okay.
Have empty
Yeah,
classrooms.
they
Okay.
said the staff, right, maintained.
Yeah, so when they moved into that building, very conscious decision, they did not combine any classes or anything. While they had an opportunity to do that, Pam felt strongly that it was going to be too much of a disruption, so she brought the entire staff from the buildings that were being combined into that building, and she wants to give it a year or two to see how things shake out and what the, the class sizes, et cetera, look like. Maybe at some point, you don't need 9 sections of third grade. Maybe you can go down to 8, and that would be just a few more students in each room. But at this point, she didn't feel a need or want to do that until she saw how everything sort of worked together. So she maintained a full staff.
And then, I know you said the Doyon site's 17 acres. How much of that, like, is wetlands abutting? Like, what's the limit what's actual buildable acres on Doyon, right? Because it is wetland.
I can't answer that.
No, I couldn't answer
Okay,
that off the top of my head.
I just want to make it clear that we did not deliberate when we were at the site.
No.
That questions were asked by Dr. Blake, and we were able to listen to the response. We did not discuss it, and then we took the tour,
Right.
and we just heard
It's really hard.
I know, I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
but
no.
we took notes, and then this is where we're able to talk about it.
Right.
So to be clear.
That's a good point. So
No,
questions
totally know that. I'm just
questions were
thinking, like-
asked before, I received the questions in the days before the visit, so that when we went on the tour, I was able to ask all the questions. Unbeknownst to me, Pam had a whole presentation ready to go, and I actually had to stop her, and I said, Pam, you and I haven't talked about this, right? Because she was answering questions that I had, but I didn't even need to ask.
Yeah, it was
because
like she was
just
talking about
her.
Ipswich.
Yeah.
No, I was just curious, just because, like, I wouldn't want a school to be squished onto a site with, like, little limitations or whatever have you. I didn't know
Oh, yeah,
what,
no.
what, how
So,
to build a
Mhm.
combined school. Because I know there are limitations, and obviously you can't copy and paste Swampscott's onto Doyon's or anything similar, but I wonder,
That's it. No, it's a great question.
Yeah,
That's,
just-
that's a huge
yeah.
piece of what we go through in the next phase,
Mhm.
is to sort that and a host of other things out. I
Right.
think those are the questions we will all have, the other boards will bring, and so those are the ones we'll start to capture, ask the MSBA. Lots of those are things they're gonna bring and say, hey, are you thinking about this? So
yeah, because a lot of, like, the negatives that I've heard just from, like, the big hallways, it seems like really easy fixes, especially if we're in control of
absolutely.
doing all of it, and because it's not going to be a copy and paste from the current Swampscott format, if that is something we're looking at. But
Well, and that information definitely already exists from the first round of feasibility, just none of us know it off the top of our head. So like, we can easily find that information in terms of buildable acreage,
yeah,
because it was
That's what
vetted as a site the last time around.
That's where these
Right.
tours have been a huge benefit to the considerations for things we know beyond the schools that our own kids have gone through. As those comparison points, what do we see? What works for our education needs? What worked for that individual town? What suits Ipswich? So that's where it's particularly helpful, not just that we're doing it based off of the 4 schools that are here currently.
We still haven't seen a school that has a campus style, because we talked about that in our workshops last spring, that that would be a really nice option to know about
We could
for
follow, of
the
course, as
Doyon site.
potential one. Sure.
Yeah.
And that means, for those of us who don't know,
So kind of a more separation of, like, upper, lower, call it, grades. I think you can't put two actual buildings, but joined by maybe a gym and cafeteria.
I guess how would that differ, right, how would that differ from what we saw?
I think you were the biggest fan of campus style, no? Like, after we saw Amesbury, I know that
I
that
like
was something
this.
like two wings with, I think it would just be configured differently than one lobby and go in different directions. Like, this is clearly one long building and not a conjoined building by more of a atrium lobby.
Oh, I see what you mean. Lexington High School is something similar, where like, it's like they separate the different, I get that.
And it would make the building look smaller.
Yeah.
If you had two,
Yeah.
you know, sections, you know, by this like grand hallway or something like that, where it was this size and then it went down, had a little separation, connected, because it has to be. So I thought that might,
But this,
I'm capturing these, we've had a few of these other, could we see something like this? What works? I think, I'd like that we've been doing the tours, and we can certainly do more. I think, should we be invited in? These are good ones for us to talk to the MSBA about, how to consider what should we see, and kind of like Charlie's question of they'll be helpful with, you're asking about that, and you all should see these, or consider these other things.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we'll have really rich conversations, we'll just start to
Yeah.
move into it too.
Yeah.
I think it's a good suggestion. I noted it, we'll make sure we
Yeah.
capture it in our full list here.
yeah, I mean, we have, hopefully tomorrow, we will be invited into a very long, detailed process.
Yeah.
We need feasibility, we need money, we need to study this. This is just, it's really nice that we got to see this, but we have, hopefully,
The West Elementary that Andover just built with MSBA funding, I think, has more of a layout that you're talking about. They just opened that this fall as well.
yeah.
It's a behemoth. I think they're pre-K through 5, and they built it for 1,100 kids or something like that.
Yeah.
They don't have that many in right now, so they're having to redistrict, but
Right. Yeah.
it might be worth a trip
Yeah.
at some point.
I think,
And I think one of the, as we get further down the road, the site will dictate some of that, I think.
Yeah.
You know, in that, how the Doyon site is laid out now is going to dictate what kind of a building and the layout of it, and how sprawling or compact it is.
Yeah.
So,
Similar.
The last thing that just hasn't been mentioned that I really, really liked on my really like list was each classroom had essentially a window seat with like really nice sort of overhead lighting and like maybe this deep, maybe not this deep, of just a really long, like the whole back of the classroom. And I think every classroom had with sort of cushions, and I think that was one of the things that the superintendent said was more expensive, but it was like a non-negotiable for her because she felt like that really added to the sort of cozy, small feel. And I thought that was a nice part of the classrooms.
Yeah, we saw it on the crummiest day of the year, too. I mean,
Yeah, and a lot of the classrooms were really like,
Monsoon,
really
pretty
close up to
yeah.
the woods. So it's like this whole wall of windows with the window seat and the woods.
and it still
It's
looked
nice, yeah.
cozy and fun, yeah.
All right, so about that follow-up tour, do you want to just,
yeah,
Chat about-
I can reach out. She made the offer already, so let's see who and when, and I can, when I have a time frame, I can set something up.
Okay.
It's not difficult to do.
okay, that'd be great. All right, any final thoughts? Okay. New business? Great. Consent agenda, move the Ipswich School Committee to accept the following. Meeting minutes from November 21st, 2024, a donation in the amount of $5,000 from the Ipswich Education Foundation for the Racing Challenge Finals trip to be deposited into the high school gift account, and a donation in the amount of $513.37 from the Winthrop School Fries for the purchase of fiber art supplies to be deposited in the Winthrop gift account.
Second?
I moved it, second by Matt. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimously passes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
By Jen, second by Matt. All in favor? Oh, one
Did we
opposed?
review the minutes from the last meeting?
What's that?
I think we need to do that, right?
That was in the, I read it.
Oh, we just say, okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Great. Unanimous, adjourned at 9:10. Great.
Thank you.
So tomorrow.
How can I text Charlotte?